Hello, this is Jamie Clubb from Club Chimera Martial Arts, and I'm here today to talk to you about my podcast. It was started in 2018 and it's rather inventively called Jamie Clubb's Podcast. It's the most left field, self-indulgent service I offer, and some of you love it for that reason. You've got my YouTube channel, generally to look at more specific subjects, and my blog, of course, which does all my lesson reports. But it's the podcast where I really get a chance to express myself in relation to martial arts and self-protection. Sometimes we can go quite deep into a particular area of martial arts or a martial arts figure. But other times it can be subjects that seem quite tenuous in their connection to martial arts. But as one of my most recent podcasters put it, everything is martial arts. So yeah, I find a connection there throughout my life. Which now brings me back to the point that we have several podcast subjects that I would like to cover. And some of these are subjects that go back long before I started doing the podcast in 2018. Subjects like the lust for failure. It was inspired by a comedian called Billy Connolly, who described an issue that he had with his own country of Scotland and their culture, and something he called the lust for failure. I'm not going to go too much into it. It's a great stand-up set, but it inspired me to write a post called The Lust for Failure in 2007. I then later updated it and revised it a little, and now I'd like to take it much further and put it into a podcast form. It's one of the many topics I have listed and in a poll in the Club Chimera Martial Arts group. Other subjects include Burning Carthage, which looks at knowing when it's time to pull back from a conflict. Pick your battles, as the expression goes, but also understanding when you've actually won, when you've won a topic, and when matters are now becoming too emotional and can be problematic. So Burning Carthage, yeah, great subject to discuss, and I'd love to cover that one. But neck and neck at the top, we have Cakewalker, which is the anticipated follow-up to Cole for Jersey Joe. That was the Christmas trilogy that I did on one of the most underrated heavyweights in boxing history, Jersey Joe Walcott. So I'd love to cover Jersey Joe Walcott's continuing story, and that's in Cakewalker. If you remember, at the end of the Christmas trilogy, Jersey Joe was set to face Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion, and a person that many fighters, trainers and boxing historians consider to be the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. So the two were set to fight finally, the two students, that was where we left off at the end of Cole for Jersey Joe. So next up, we have The Way of the Vulture. And again, this was just pretty much a throwaway topic for me to begin with, but since I put it forward as a suggested title, it's become an interesting avenue to explore, and it's often some of the best ones that I've done, especially on my Way of the Animal series, which I did a few years back. It's been an interesting exploration for me. As you'll notice, some of those have been put onto video. The Way of the Wolf trilogy, for example, is being put on in video form on YouTube. So we have The Way of the Vulture, which specifically was to look at opportunism in self-defense, that is criminal opportunism and opportunists, criminals who on impulse, and the problems associated with that. But also the iconography of vultures. What does that mean for martial arts? What does that mean for self-defense in a broader sense? Can we look at the iconography of a vulture in a positive light? And I believe we can, where they're often cast as the baddies, but are in fact, as some people have pointed out, one of nature's greatest anti-heroes. So what a great way to delve into on the Jamie Clubb podcast, known for being left field in martial arts and self-protection. The Way of the Vulture will be a very interesting subject, and yeah, it's competing there with Cakewalker. The two of them are neck and neck and tied. So there's also The Way of the Bat on the animal subjects, and that was one that I was really looking forward to covering around the time that the new Batman movie was out. So obviously there's connections to Batman, probably one of the most famous fictional martial artists, and and certainly the first superhero I fell in love with when I got into comic books as a kid. Never really seeing the martial arts connection until many, many years later. He wasn't the comic book character that got me into studying martial arts, but as time went on, his martial arts connections were made more prominent in the comic books, and it's interesting to have a look back at his history, but also the mythology of the bat. What bats mean to different cultures and how that can relate to martial arts and martial arts personalities in terms of hybrid martial arts, in terms of individuals who are vagabond warriors, like the moniker that I choose for a lot of the physical training that we do, or the cross training that we do in Club Chimera Martial Arts. So yeah, love to study that one as well, love to cover that one, and I will do, but I just need to decide the order. And I almost forgot Blocking Bluebeard. This topic gets its name from the famous French folk tale about a cobalt-bewhiskered, uxocidal, serial-killing nobleman. The story provides us with a range of self-protection and martial arts-related discussion points and lessons. There is the Pandora-like curiosity of the story's heroine that leads her to discover Bluebeard's bloody secret. Then we have the tactics she adopts in self-defense that have direct parallels with real-life cases of survival against serial killers. We also have an often named, if inaccurate, historical source for the tale in the form of Gilles de Rais, who nevertheless provides us with yet another example of how supposed heroes can also be supposed villains. Rais also provides us with a large-scale example of a martial artist who turned his life into a lavish stage production. So can we get the votes in? So in order to do that, it's quite simple. Like the business page, if you haven't already, that's great. And more likes we have on that, the better, obviously. And anywhere else that social media, follow the YouTube channel and like and subscribe. Please like this particular video, obviously, as I always say, and put a comment below. If you've direct messaged me or you've emailed me, as several of you have, to voice your support for one of the different topics that's listed in the group, please convert that into an actual vote. Go into the Club Chimera Martial Arts group and put your vote there. Now, if you're somebody who's voted already, then get one of your fellow Club Chimera Martial Arts followers and group members and get them to vote for the topic you like, or encourage them to vote for something else. I mean, I'd like to think that everything is still in the running. It's not just between Vulture and Cakewalker. It'd be nice if one of the other subjects might suddenly come up like Jersey Joe Woolcock as the underdog and suddenly take the crown. Oops, bit of a spoiler warning there on some of the Jersey Joe Woolcock story. But anyway, yeah, I'd love your votes. So yeah, this is suitably ad-libbed, inspired by the days of storytelling that I used to watch on TV, and particularly Tony Robinson's Iliad and Odyssey stories, where he used to be running around different locations that may or may not have had any connection to the stories he was telling. There were lots of storytellers doing this back in Britain at the time, and that's why I thought I'd choose this location, and I thought it was very suitable for this particular vlog. This particular cry for help on the Jamie Club podcast. I really would like your votes in. I'd like to make a decision on which story I'm going to produce, because I have done nothing apart from some extra research on some of the subjects on these particular podcasts. So the whole podcast is being held up by literally one vote, actually, at the moment, but I'd like to think a lot more and we could get a lot more interest in it. I know there are supporters of the podcast who are quite passionate about the podcast. They love talking to me about it, and I really like that. But we're quite niche at the moment, and I'd like to organically grow that following. And so please push people towards the podcast itself if they haven't heard it, but get them to become members of the group. Request membership to the Club Chimera Martial Arts Facebook group. Okay, so make sure that's an important point. It's a Facebook group. Obviously, like the business page, follow the other areas, but get in the Club Chimera Martial Arts group and cast your vote. Put your vote down there. The poll's up there. It's pinned to the top. Go for it. Let's get something going, and then let's get a podcast out soon. And once that one's sorted, then all the others will follow in appropriate order. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for following the videos, and please, like and subscribe, and let's see your vote on the Jamie Club podcast.